Hello, it is Diane Cox here and back for another video on the Mythic Tarot. We're talking about the major arcana, and on the last video I kind of overfilled it, I think, so I'm going to do just one card this time. The last video I did the Fool, the Magician, the Emperor, the Empress and the High Priestess. Why did I do that? I don't know. It's like, so what I'm going to do is just talk about the next card. The last card we did was talking about the High Priestess. The beautiful lunar energy of the High Priestess, the intuitive, mysterious and conscious, the fantastic goddessness of the High Priestess. And this time we are looking at the Hierophant. Okay? Now, for me, the Hierophant is the High Priest. Okay? This is the figure of Chiron. And for me, after the High Priestess comes the High Priest. And they have slightly different, obviously very different symbolism and purpose and meaning in this Mythic Tarot deck. And with the High Priest or the Hierophant, you know, in the Rider-Waite, it is often kind of seen as a pope-like figure, you know, a kind of a spiritual leader. Doesn't quite ring with me. However, when we look at the story and the myth of Chiron, it is an interesting one. So here we have the Hierophant coming after the High Priestess, the High Priest. And why is he the High Priest? What is the Hierophant about? Okay, well, let's first talk to you about the story of Chiron. And it kind of really helps when you're looking at this in a reading, okay? So Chiron was born from an amorous attention of the Titan, the god Cronus, okay? So Chiron comes from immortal godliness, and therefore inherits some immortality from his father. Who was his mother? Okay, so Cronus the Titan had a thing going on for, he came down to earth and he met the ocean nymph Philaera, and he just fell in love with Philaera, or was it lust? Who knows? These gods, you know what they are, lusty beings. So he just had a big crush on Philaera, the ocean nymph. And Philaera was not interested in anything to do with Kronos, thank you very much. And so asked Zeus to turn her into a horse, a mare, a female horse. So she could run off into the forest and hide, hopefully, from Kronos, and, you know, get away from his unwanted advances. So Zeus granted her wish, and Philaera got turned into a horse. However, Kronos, being a Titan god, obviously got wind of this. Everyone's grassing on everyone, aren't they, in the gods? They've all got spies everywhere. So he himself turned into a horse and went in hot pursuit of Philaera in her horsey form in the forest. And you can guess what comes next. Horse on horse, rumpy-pumpy, horsey action in the forest, and Philaera got with child. So she kept in the forest and she kind of hid away, and she gave birth eventually to this little being. And Philaera was so disgusted with the look of what she'd given birth to, poor little Chiron, half human, half beast, and was so disgusted that she basically abandoned him, left him, just left him. Kronos was nowhere to be seen, mother's not interested, left on his own, left for dead, but just left, okay? Now, what's quite interesting about the beginnings of Chiron, so here he is. So the centaurs, so obviously he's half human, half horse, which is a centaur. The centaurs had a reputation of being wild, kind of savagey type of, uncontrollable. I always think of things like, the centaurs in Harry Potter in the Forbidden Forest, and how wild and free they were. However, Chiron was a little bit different because he had a different parentage than the average centaur, shall we say. Now, I'll mention this now. Chiron in astrology is related to, and I'll expand on this, is related to things that happen in childhood that formulate and frame a lot of life path, happenings, events, situations and stuff. So bear that in mind when I talk about some of this later. This was his childhood. He was born out of a god pursuing a nymph who didn't want his attentions, and then they had the old wild thing in the forest, and he was born. So he was born kind of not wanted, and he was born as a centaur and rejected by his mother, rejected by Kronos. Kronos probably never knew he had a child. Anyway, let's get to the tarot. That's some of his, that's his lineage, okay. He got married, he had his own children, so, it's all good. He had love and he had, some nice life and stuff. So let's get on to the card. Chiron, as this grown person, is basically, now just look at the symbolism first. Let's start with the archway. A kind of nod to the symbolism of the two pillars and the middle path of the two pillars, always going through gateways. And also Chiron is sitting, he lives in a cave, and that is symbolic of, he lives in the earth, he is of the earth, he is kind of close to the earth, he learns from the earth, okay? He doesn't live in the clouds, he doesn't live in the ocean, he is of earth, okay? That's the cave. And of course the cave is also symbolic of retreating and being inward, a bit like the hermit in a way. But he's in the cave, and it reminds me, so when you see this card, think about caves and think about the sadhus and the gurus and the highly learned men of the Himalayas, however you like to say it. These great enlightened beings who just go and sit in a cave in freezing temperatures, and they have like one blanket, and they have a bit of food, and they don't have really anything else, and silence, and so think about that when you think of Chiron, because Chiron is about spirituality. Chiron is a spiritual guide, he's a spiritual mentor. Okay, so when you see that cave, think, oh yeah, he's in a cave, because that's what they do when learned men go inwards. It's a journey inwards, okay? It's a good, it's a really good way of just starting to connect with the card. So the high priest in ancient times, a word for the high priest was a pontifex. And a pontifex basically means a maker of bridges. So think about this Chiron being in the cave. He's deep within himself. He's a spiritual guide, a spiritual mentor, and he is making bridges to the inner self and to connect with the divine and everything to do with that spiritual journey. Okay. What he has in his hand, he has a scroll which basically is symbolic of divine law, the laws of nature, and spiritual law. Okay, because that is what he is about. He's about expanding the soul on a spiritual level. He's about the expansion of knowledge, because Chiron himself was a highly gifted, talented, incredibly knowledgeable and wise being. Because when he was abandoned by Philyra and obviously Kronos, and what happened in the end, the sun god Apollo and the moon goddess Artemis, Diana, basically took Chiron in and taught him all of the fine arts of the gods. So he was an astrologer, a mathematician, obviously an astronomer. He was a herbalist. He is kind of the demigod. Is he a demigod or is he a god? Anyway, he was immortal. He was the guardian and the leader, patron saint, if you like, of medicine men and women, people who were into healing. He was an incredible healer. So this is, when you look at this card, allow the symbolism to remind you of what it's all about, the scroll. And then he's doing this sign, which is very misunderstood in modern days. People think it's all kinds of weird things. It's like, okay. So so it's got a few meanings, this has. So in the Sanskrit yoga type of thing, this is the Arcana mudra, which is related to rejuvenation. Okay. And in Buddhism, I think it's called a Karana mudra, and it is to keep away evil spirits, negativity, and demons. So when you see people doing that kind of thing, it's to keep away negative energy. All right. Now, in Wicca and paganism, it is the sign of the horn god. But what is the horn god? So in like the Wicca paganism, you've got Mother Earth, everything on Earth, the growing, the fertility, the germination. And think about all this when you're looking at the card. Okay, so just kind of think about that, and it's like, okay, all these things that it stands for. Rejuvenation, keeping away even spirit. And in Indian dance, when they do this, it is a symbol of a lion, which is power, the strength and power. So it has a lot of meanings. So when you're looking at Chiron doing that sign, and sorry, in paganism, to carry on, and Wicca, you've got Mother Goddess, Mother Nature. And then the horn god is often seen, what I like to call it, is the Lord of the Wildwood. It's that kind of green man kind of figure, but it's Lord of the Wildwood for me. This male figure that is kind of so in touch with the earth and so in touch with, it's the Mother Earth's counterpart. It's the goddess counterpart, the goddess counterpart. And paganism, Wicca is all about the earth, all about honouring earth, all about honouring trees and land and the cycles of life. Again, something people get very confused about often. So that's the sign he is holding there. So for me, I would think, okay, Chiron holding that sign, for me, I've always thought it's almost like, for him, it's a sign of power. I don't really see it as holding away negativity, But it's like, it's interesting how it's bathed in that light, and it's you know, well, maybe he's just kind of warding off negativity, or he is giving a special, because he lives of the earth, he's kind of bowing his head to the horned balance of the goddess energy. Okay, so just think about that when you're thinking about Chiron. So as the high priestess is the moon, and the intuition and that deep mystery, and that sometimes things that are behind the veil, things that we don't yet know of. Chiron is very of the mind and of logic. He's intelligent. He thinks. Okay, he's a thinker. He's highly gifted in so many areas. And so it's like, okay, it's the mind. He is the one that advises Jason before he goes to get the golden fleece on how to do it, how to go about it. And Chiron was often asked by leaders all over the world to train and educate their sons and anyone who's going to be a leader or a great warrior. Like, for instance, that he taught Achilles. I think he taught Ares. He taught all these, you know, all these heroes that you read about. He is the one that taught them. And it's quite interesting because he always was asked to teach them about kind of spiritual leadership and spiritual ways of doing things, and high wisdom, high knowledge. They could do with some of that these days, couldn't they? They could do with a modern day Chiron going, right, you lot, get some spirituality in your whole aura and your soul. You've forgotten who you are. You're forgotten about leading. You've been consumed by dark forces. And look, Chiron is holding that position of keeping them away. Good old Chiron. So when this appears in a spread, it's about spiritual journey, spiritual quest. It's about maturing. It's about asking yourself, you know, the bigger questions in life. It's about, you want answers to deeper questions. It's a deeper card. You're looking for counseling. You're looking for support. You're looking for a mentor, a guide of a spiritual or emotional kind, you know, or these are the qualities that need to be brought out in yourself. So if you have Chiron, it's like, okay, it's time to maybe train in something new, expand your mind, expand your spirituality, expand who you are, okay? And also, you can't help but think, can you? Centaur, Sagittarius, and the ninth house ruled by Jupiter. Higher learning. You know, one of the things of the ninth house, higher learning, right? And that ninth house ruled by Jupiter. So all these things relate to Chiron. And so when you see it, you're just like, okay, let's just... I mean, horses are often related to freedom and power in some of the Native American cultures. Some, maybe all of them. And there's some great Native American meditations on horses and stuff, if you feel drawn to that. So when you see Chiron in a spread, it's like, okay, it's wise. It's a wise being who's been through, you know, his own trials and tribulations. And going back to what I was going to say, what I said earlier, in astrology, Chiron is known as the wounded healer. Actually, probably even more than not just astrology. So Chiron is known as the wounded healer. I always think that's a bit unfortunate because he's a super gifted, all-round wise man, beast and centaur. But he became known as a wounded healer, and let me tell you why. So what happened to Chiron in the end? Chiron, this is the version I like the most. There's a few versions about his end. But I'm already laughing because I find this a bit funny. I shouldn't, but I do. So anyway, this is the version I like. Chiron was being entertained by some centaurs, and they were having this little party together, just a few of them, and they opened the wine, and the smell of the wine went all through the forest and attracted all the wild centaurs to the little gathering they were having. And the gathering, in one of the gathering, one of the people in the gathering was Heracles or Hercules. And so all these wild centaurs came because of the smell of the wine, and Hercules had to fight them off. And in the battle, a poison arrow basically grazed Chiron and created a wound that could not be healed. In another version, basically Chiron gets asked to make a poison for one of the great heroes he is teaching. And he makes this very special potion, being a herbalist, and accidentally drops it on his foot. Hoof. Hoof. So yeah, if he drops it on his hoof, it wouldn't have had any effect. Some versions say he got shot in the knee, flank. Anyway, he got a wound with this poison on, which he couldn't heal, and was in immense pain. So this is why he becomes known as a wounded healer. And in astrology, Chiron is very much related to wounds, often wounds we receive as kids and children, and stuff that happens that, just somehow imprints early on in our lives. And the idea with Chiron in astrology is that you take that thing that's happened and you work with it throughout your life, and then turn it around and offer your learning and your healing to those that might be kind of experiencing something similar. Okay, so the wounded healer is exactly what Chiron has become associated with. The wounds that cannot be healed. And what happened to Chiron was he was in so much pain, he asked Zeus, he asked the gods to take away his immortality, so he could basically die and rest in peace, kind of thing, which they granted. And what he actually did, he gave this energy, this immortality, a kind of an exchange thing with Prometheus, who had been punished by Zeus to be chained to a rock for all of eternity and have his liver pecked out every day. It rejuvenated overnight and it got pecked out every day, and that was his torture. That is like, who would ever think of that kind of thing? Horrible. So Prometheus got to get free from that torture. He kind of took Chiron's immortality. Chiron got put into the heavens as the constellation of Centaurus, and then astrologically we obviously use this little planetoid as the wounded healer to see where our wounds are in our birth chart and how we can work with them and how we basically turn them around. That's what life's about, isn't it? The spiritual path is about being better and better and knowing yourself better, the bridges to the self, finding the answers for yourself, and connecting to your own spirituality, your own divinity. So when you think of Chiron's childhood, like I say, he was born from an unwanted affection. He was born looking different, and he was abandoned by his mother and father. And in astrology, that's that's the Chiron wound that cannot be healed. I don't actually like to say wounds cannot be healed, because I think everyone can always create an environment where healing takes place. There may be scars, but healing can take place. All kinds of healing for all kinds of things, mental, spiritual, physical, emotional, healing can take place. So anything else I want to say about Chiron? Yes, so that's it, I think.